Welcome to today's episode, hockey fans. Thanks for being here. Got a great guest along, Rick Judd, already here in the room with me, in the Zoom room, that is. But the Kraken just wrapped up that 6-game road trip. They're now just past the halfway point, and this morning I thought it'd be great to sit down with Rick, have a little bit of a Morning Cup of Kraken, the first one this season. So thanks for being here. Rick, how are you doing this morning?
Doing great this morning. Really enjoying that it's the weekend. Been definitely busy start to the beginning of the calendar year. So it was nice to enjoy some good hockey, and I'm excited to break it all down.
And I know you went out to the Winter Classic. We're going to talk about that kind of towards the end of the stream, get your take, your memories. But like I said, been wanting to do this for a while. We finally carved out some time here. I think we're both a little bit in bachelor mode this morning, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
So great time to do it. You know, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the breaking news. We've got Yanni Gourde, 2-game suspension. The Kraken just get back home. They're already shorthanded. Now they're going to be without Yanni Gourde for 2 games. What are your thoughts on that as we go into this homestand tonight?
It's a bit of a catch-22 because in that suspension itself and like the hit and the charge, it was I wouldn't call it dirty because as much as Yanni Gourde is a like antagonizing player, I don't think he's headhunting.
Right.
The league is quite removed from the enforcer role, from the headhunting mentality, but he's definitely an antagonizer. And what that suspension doesn't show you is the entire game, a lot of antagonizing from Edmonton, particularly from McDavid, taking advantage of his superstardom and his protected, more or less, whether it's official or not, but his protected rights. And this was just that, like, you don't catch the first part, you always get caught when you retaliate. But it was, he left his feet. He's a good 6 inches shorter than Ekholm, and he was the same height as him. When you see pictures, Derek, friend of the pod, Past the Crack, showed like screenshots of it. It's like, yeah, he's a good like 3 or 4 inches off the ice. So it was not the best of hit. So I expected a fine just based on how the Department of Player Safety has been acting this year. But in on-brand fashion for that department, consistency lacks everywhere. So two games seems a bit not aligned with how they've been fining and suspending players depending on what's been happening. If you remember back to last year, Alexiak had a hit to the head, but really he was a good 8 inches taller than the other guy, and the elbow hit the dude's helmet. So it was a hit to the head, but it wasn't dirty. It wasn't malicious. It kind of just happened. And he got 3 games.
It was more of a circumstantial, because he's that tall.
Matty Beniers checked into the boards and has been out since. No fine, no suspension from the player department. Last year, Tyler Myers, complete.
And that was called boarding.
Yeah.
Right?
And last year, Tyler Myers blindsiding Matty Beniers, no suspension, no fine. So there's a definite lack of consistency from the player safety department, but I don't think when we all look at this, we're surprised that something happened. It's just unfortunate that in this moment in time, we're going to lose a healthy body for 2 games because that's kind of the biggest issue right now, kind of going into just how they've been playing lately with this. We have people sick. Everybody, it feels like, is either sick or hurt right now. So losing an extra body is definitely not what you want. But knowing it's a definitive timeline that will get him back later this week, I think is fine. But I think also in the long run, with how we've been playing the last couple games, you kind of needed it. Like, as much as we're going to miss Gourde on the ice, like, you needed someone to finally just kind of not necessarily drop gloves because he didn't fight, but to just kind of like, you know what, like, I'll just take the fine. And you got to hit people. We have built a brand of not really consistently sticking up for other skaters on the ice. So this was, I think, kind of needed for morale purposes. While he'll be missed on the ice, I think the morale of, hey, we're finally starting to show some backbone and we aren't just going to get pushed around anymore, I think might be a benefit in the long run.
Yeah, sometimes the boys, you just got to blow a little steam off, right? So maybe a little bit of that, a little bit of frustration. Like you said, a lot of people sick. You don't know everybody that is potentially sick if that's spreading through the room. Maybe they placed a water bottle strategically over on the Edmonton side.
Yeah.
I don't hope for people to get sick or anything like that, but this is part of the deal when you're in a locker room and you're traveling and, the minutes add up away from family, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to get worn down a little bit. So it's good to have the Kraken home. Let's see what they can do without Yanni Gourde for a couple of games. But a critical homestand, it's 4 games here in Seattle. Mike Benton also reported some comments from Ron Francis, the GM of the Seattle Kraken, yesterday, commented on the Grubauer move to LTIR. That was just really a cap space move. I think a lot of people initially kind of lost their collective, what, but
Yeah.
I think everything's normal there, right? Sounds like.
Yeah. Well, he's been out long enough that the difference between IR and long-term IR isn't that, like, that was his point. Like, it doesn't change trajectory, doesn't change recovery. Like, he's been out long enough that he could come
Hmm.
back. Like, I think the way he phrased it was like it could be as soon as like today or tomorrow that he ends
Right.
up coming back because he's already been out long enough. But similar to when we sent Cartier down to Coachella Valley and brought Shane Wright up just to put Schwartz on long or IR at the time. Um,
Hmm.
we are one of the teams that are pretty much right up against the regular salary cap. So anytime you have to make personnel moves, it's got to do some little finagling and kind of like some roster or cap manipulation a little bit. So I think he made a good point, and what he really did there, like in telling Grubauer like the Grubauer situation, he basically made a phone call to the other 31 teams without having to get on 31 phone calls because he also started talking
Yeah.
about their positioning for come March with the trade deadline. He talked about we've got draft picks, we've got prospects without naming anybody specific, but he basically
Hmm.
told the league and put them on watch like, hey, we might have sold last year or been really inactive last year. But we're going to push. Like, we aren't as freely or confidently in a playoff spot right now. Like, right now we aren't in a playoff spot. So we've got to do something if we want to play in April and in the playoffs. So I think he accomplished a task of putting the league on watch with that press con or that chat with Benton.
Yeah, and you don't hear from Ron a whole lot. So usually when you do, it's very intentional what he's going to say. He's
Mhm.
very thoughtful, plays the cards close. I like to say that a lot. But yeah, I think that's a good point. He's kind of putting it out there. And also just to reemphasize, the Kraken are not in a playoff spot right now, despite that 9-game win streak. You finished the road trip on, a 3-game losing streak, but they've made great strides to kind of get back into this, right? So they're right there, but you got to get over that hump a little bit here. And that's why I think this next, I keep saying these stretches are critical, every one that we go into, but they are so critical when you start the season the way they did.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the road trip here real quick, Rick, as we go. But just, you can't start the way they did and then also expect to get through so many injuries like they're doing. I'm surprised they're even in contention right now. That 9-game streak was just incredible. If you want to talk about that a little bit as that led into the road trip, Rick.
Yeah. It's kind of becoming early January as the Kraken's jam. Like, this is exactly the same situation as last year. We won a game at home and then went on a long road trip and swept it. Like, we didn't quite sweep it this year, and we had a little bit of a longer winning streak going into the road trip. But this early January has been defined by a long road trip that we played very, very well for the most part. Um,
Hmm.
that winning streak, we were finally clicking. Decord had been playing probably some of the best goalie hockey that the league might have seen so far this year, let alone in his whole career. Really stood out. Um, Obviously, the game against Philadelphia with the shutout, and then the Winter Classic game with the shutout. But just was playing out of his mind and putting us in a spot where we can find ourselves in situations to win hockey games, which is great. I don't think the end of our road trip was a coincidence, as we've talked about, like with injuries and sickness. Like, it felt that Columbus game is where we had a couple injuries, and then some guys show that they got sick, and then we started not playing as well. So I think that is
Yeah.
more of a definition of why the wheels kind of fell off, more so
Hmm.
than they just were tired or whatever. I think when you're clicking on all cylinders and then wheels start to fall off, I think that is more indicative of the style of play or the lack of play than anything else.
Yeah. We got a couple cameos going on here during this episode. We'll see what we edit in or out, but
Yeah.
it's all good.
Life of a dad.
I had a visitor too, climbed up on my lap, so
Mhm.
we'll just let him sleep down here. Life it goes fast and there's lots of things to do. That's why I was kind of joking coming into this. I haven't This is the first Morning Cup of Kraken episode I've done this whole season
Mhm.
because I don't really have time in the mornings right now. It's
Yeah.
been a struggle to find time, but yeah, so Kraken finish up that road trip 3-3. I think if you looked at those last 3 games of the road trip, just if you were looking at the schedule at the beginning of the season, you probably would have said, "Ooh, that's going to be a tough one," especially with Pittsburgh, New York, Rangers, and Edmonton at the end of it. So, it kind of went how I thought. I was hoping for about a 500 record on this road trip, so you kind of keep pace. I would have loved to see them beat one of those 3 teams, but it didn't happen. But that's where we're at, Rick. A 3-3 on that road trip, not too bad, all things considered, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you look at the lead up with that 9-game win streak and points and gosh, 13 in a row, 12, 13. It took us from definitely out of playoff contention into at one point a playoff spot. And I think now we're just a few
Mhm.
points out of a spot. So other than being like solidly in a playoff spot, which right now with the Pacific Division is going to be real hard to come by, but to be close is kind of where you want to be.
Yep.
As we kind of mentioned with Ron talking about the trade deadline, like there's opportunity to make some personnel moves if we want, but if we need to add something, we're there, and it could
Mhm.
be exactly how we've seen the last couple of years. Adding Tolvanen midseason changed the script. Adding Tatar this year has changed the script. It might just be one extra move or addition, and that could even be within our system. Like it might be now that Shane Wright has pretty much been on a heater the entire time he's been at Coachella Valley. Like whenever the team decides he's ready, if he comes up and can change the way that this team is playing, we might easily find ourselves in a playoff spot. But I think we are just outside of it, but we are within reach, and I'm comfortable where we're at and what signs we're showing.
It's always crazy to me how just one guy can make such a huge, chemistry difference
Yeah.
in the way it can change the lines up, especially with Seattle. We've kind of got a little bit of a log jam up top. There are some contracts that are going to be expiring at the end of this season.
Mm-hmm.
So as a GM, those things are all on your mind. The whole team, I'm sure, in the front office. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a few names depart that we love, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what you go through during trade deadline season. Every season, it's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're selling, buying, even sometimes when you're just staying put. Maybe you're going to move some guys around in your lineup, but yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I feel like they're right there within striking distance, and even just one new person or one little tweak here or there could go a long ways. I was just saying no worries, but I have a couple worries
Yes.
about the Kraken offensively. We were getting a lot of goals through that win streak. One of the issues early in the season was we just weren't scoring enough. Do you think this is still going to be an issue, or have they kind of figured that out? Maybe the power play is playing a little bit better. I don't know. What do you think offensively?
I mean, you look at kind of the broader picture, and I think we are working a lot better at that. Um,
Hmm.
through that win streak, and even going back before that, like the shutout loss to Los Angeles, all the way through until getting shut out by Pittsburgh, we were scoring multiple goals a game, and
Right.
more often than not, that was resulting in a win, which is great. And then it kind of just, like I said, I think the sickness that they had mentioned was a little bit more widespread than just the guys who were missing ice time.
Hmm.
And then you lose Beniers, you lose Dunn. And there's one other that was out for a game. Oh, Larson. No,
Larson.
he
Yeah.
played. But you lose some
He
guys
was.
to day to day.
Yeah.
You have everyone pretty much sick. Um, and like I said, I don't think it's a coincidence these last 3 games have been so drastically different than the rest of the road trip and the rest of the winning streak. Um, there's just no other explanation as to why, like, so drastically their style of play changed, like especially on it might have been the Columbus game. Maybe it was the Pittsburgh game, but it just was night and day difference. Like it was completely different.
Hmm.
They didn't look the same. Their shifts were different. Like they didn't look like they were clicking, and even
Right.
their line changes looked disorganized. It was like this.
Yep.
Watching it was just like this is not the Kraken team. This is a team struggling to survive a
Yeah.
something, a flu or a bug going in the locker room. Like, so I'm not.
Yeah.
Oh, if it continues, like when we get done back from his day to day, when Maddie is cleared to play again, like if we get our guys who are under the weather or not feeling well, if they come back and we're still not clicking, then yes, I
Mhm.
might have some concern, and I probably move the priority of some personnel moves higher up the chain. Um, but for now, you kind of ride, and you're thankful that we had such a good run to pick up points. But you got to just kind of grit with it and hope that the illnesses pass and we can start playing better. So hopefully, like coming back home might be the little trip to fix it.
Little defend the deep action
Yes.
going on at Climate Pledge Arena. I think we figured out kind of how to defend it, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yep. Shout out to Rod Cudmore.
Yeah, definitely. Rob also posted kind of a funny, like when you're sick. I know how I am when I'm sick and basically on the couch, absolutely huge baby. I can't do anything. I can't imagine trying to go play a
Yeah.
hockey game.
My
So
wife calls it the man flu.
yeah, right. Yeah, you hear about this. It's a real thing.
Yep.
It's very tough for us gentlemen sometimes, but so, the Kraken, I feel like the beginning of the season, they were having such a huge struggle scoring goals. I really don't think they're going to go back to that level of, go even further into the negative differential
Yeah.
for goal scoring. But, the concern still lingers for me. I think we all expected that offensive regression. I've talked about this multiple times here on the channel coming into the season because guys just they exceeded expectations in many ways last year. Goal scoring, definitely one of them.
Hmm.
But it's good to see McCann, powering through. He's got what 18 goals now or 19, if I'm
Yeah.
remembering right, but 18, I believe. And the Kraken, it feels like they kind of found their groove offensively through that. That confidence builds a little bit, takes the pressure off. It is disappointing to see Matty Beniers go out again because he was starting to kind of get on a groove as well. But that's the way the game goes, and it changes so fast. Hockey. If you look at these teams, the Oilers team that they just played and lost to 2-4 the other night, the Oilers, they also started very poorly. I think they were 5-14 or something like, just terrible at one point, and they've completely flipped things around on a 12, 13 game win streak now. It's incredible
Yeah.
for Oilers fans, not so much for Kraken fans. But yeah, they're on a roll like none other. The Kings, another team on a streak, but a really bad streak. So I don't know if you want to talk about the Kings or maybe some divisional opponents real quick, Rick, before we kind of get into our halfway point assessment of the Kraken. But what are your thoughts just across the division in the Pacific?
The Pacific Division the last couple of years, I think since we like the Kraken joined the league, has kind of always had this. Well, they're on the West Coast, like meh, like the Ducks aren't going to be good. Like at the time, the Kings weren't good. Like there was just a lot of like almost like you're in the league, but you're not really part of it. Other than cool, here's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Like
Hmm.
that's all people cared
Yep.
about, and I think they're really changing it. Like the Canucks, out of perceivably nowhere, are one of the league's best teams right now, and
Hmm.
Edmonton fired their coach earlier this season, and it completely turned around. Like
Yeah.
this Pacific Division is tough. Like I could very much see the three playoff spots coming from the division, but also both wildcard spots coming from the Pacific. Like it's going to be tough. They're finding
Yeah.
the teams in the division are finding themselves, including the Flames, who for most of this year and even going back to last year, like with their big moves of picking up Huberdeau and Uyghur, like you and Kadri, like they made moves to really push themselves forward further into playoff contention, and they regressed big time. And they're starting to
Yeah.
click. Like they're above us in the standings right now too. So
I feel like the Flames is my fault because I was just kind of talking trash the other night on one of the live stream. Not talking trash. I was just, I was like, I don't really think that this Flames team is gonna make it, and then they start winning, like 3 games in a row or whatever it is. But yeah, so I'll take the L for that
Yeah.
one. That's my
Well, and the
bad.
Flames are the team that always is playing very bad, and then they come into
Yeah,
Seattle, and then we make Dan Vladar or whoever else they put in that look like a Vezina winner. So that
right.
there's just some curse there. But um, as much as I'd love for the Pacific to like fall apart and make it easier for the Kraken to get a guaranteed playoff spot, I think
Yeah.
it's good for the league and good for the division for it to be very, very, very competitive. Um, and just overall, like not a homer for Kraken, but like the league itself. In a
Mhm.
league and a division that has Connor McDavid in it, where everyone pays attention to have other teams be good, if not better than that, is excellent for the branding of the NHL, who have kind of always struggled to regain pre-lockout like popularity and whatever else is going to like impact low viewership numbers or anything, but having um, parity through the league and
Mhm.
more specifically in our division is really, really wonderful.
Yeah, if you're gonna feature a divisional
Yeah.
matchup on national TV out in the Pacific with Connor McDavid, you usually want it to be a good game,
Yeah.
or it's not gonna get good ratings because West Coast, time slots are kind of tough to pull the East Coast viewership in the first place. So yeah, that's sound logic in my opinion as well. I think it's better to have healthy divisions across the board. Parity is huge. It's a huge thing in the NHL, and that all plays into TV contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
it's the money game, the business side of it. Okay, so as we get into about, we're just past the halfway point of the season, 45 games into it, 19, 17, and 9, the Kraken record. Like I said, a little bit earlier, the Kraken weren't good at the beginning of the season. They kind of clawed back with that win streak that started at the beginning of December. Crazy. It was just, like a month long run. But I don't know if you want to kind of just break things down a little bit, your halfway point assessment. I'm going to also ask you, Rick, who was your MVP? And if you guys in the comments here want to chime in, that'd be great. Also, maybe who's been a little bit disappointing and also your biggest surprise so far. But yeah, let's talk just a little bit about, kind of that demarcation, that line in the sand for the Kraken halfway through. How are you feeling going into the back half of the schedule?
Yeah. I mean, we obviously the gosh, what was it, a 9-game losing streak midway through like November or so. Um,
Uh,
you don't like that, that's for sure. Um,
no.
but we are on the upswing, and like you said, we started very poorly. I think we went the longest into a season to get our first win that we have in our 3 years of being a franchise. But so it started really bad, but we're starting to fix it. Um, I kind of alluded a little bit when we talked about the road trip. Like I think we are on the cusp of where I'd really like to be. Like we're at least in contention with playoffs because a month ago, I think all of us were kind of laughing at ourselves if we even thought that, hey, you know what, we still might have a chance for the playoffs. It would need a miracle, and then we got one. So I
Yeah,
think,
even the most sorry, just to interject, even the most positive types were kind of, and myself included, I was like, "Oh boy, are they gonna fire the coach? What's gonna happen here?"
yeah,
But uh, they got back on the train tracks.
yeah. So I think we are okay. We are in a good spot, not a great spot, but we're in a good spot. Um, that I feel comfortable enough with how the second half could play out. Um,
Mhm.
so far, I would say I think our MVP for the team so far, I would say, is Decord. Um, it's the
Yep.
biggest like impact change year over year of anybody on the team. Um, as much as you'd want to say like, well, Bjorkstrand is our all star, like he's been doing great, but I think without Decord and having to have goalkeeping kind of similar to how it's been or goaltending the last like 2 years, I think we aren't anywhere close to where we are right now. So I would give the team MVP to Decord. Um, honorable mentions obviously to Vince Dunn, Bjorkstrand, some of these guys that are continually showing up. Um, And then I would say my disappointment is in the lack of stats for Beniers. I don't mind a lack of goals just because across the board the team is not really scoring all that much, or wasn't. Like, I think we're only
Right.
on pace to have like 3 guys uh go above 50 points right now on pace, which we've always kind of been more of a spread out offense and not like one singular scorer.
Yeah.
Um, but he's sitting
Yeah, they
at,
even say it like
yeah,
4 second lines, basically.
yeah. But I think he's only sitting at like 19 points. You obviously expect that quote unquote sophomore slump a little bit, but with
Sure.
how well he did last year and how few and far between his pointless streaks were, I think he only had like 3 or 4, and they were only a couple games each. Um, you expected him to kind of just continue rolling, winning the Calder. You're like, all right, that's the confidence boost you need. Like, he's really going to hit it hard. And I think
Mhm.
everybody kind of expected that next level, and it went the opposite direction. And then now that he's missing some ice time, that's going to impact his um, the way how comfortable he is on the ice and how to get back into the groove. So um, I would say that is the most disappointing part so far this year. Um, and surprising for me, I would say is Ty Cartier. Um, we got a little glimpse of him in the playoffs last year, and scoring in the playoffs as a rookie with no NHL time, like literally making debut in the playoffs, is very impressive. And he filled in for McCann without a lack of quality, which is unheard of. Um,
Yeah.
so everybody, I would say all fans were kind of really looking forward to seeing what he was going to do with a full season and in the regular season. Um, and he's done great. Um, he's been a perfect utility bottom 6 skater. I say bottom 6, but really our third line is kind of set. So it's like bottom 3, but then he
Yeah.
shifts around. He's played on the second line. He plays on some power play units. Like, I have been really impressed with his overall hockey game,
Mhm.
particularly recently with where he's kind of been showing up as um, our guy that's not afraid to stand up. Like, particularly in that
Yeah.
Edmonton game, he was antagonizing McDavid. He laid out McLeod. Like, he is always there when a scruffle starts. If it's not Yanni Gourde in the middle of it or coming over, it is Ty Cartier right there. He is your perfect like roster filling hockey player. And I think that is wonderful to get out of an undrafted minors player.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put that ending in there with the undrafted part because that is just crazy to think that they got this talent, this flexibility, the utility, like you're talking about, kind of this year's Ryan Donato in
Yes.
a way. You know, you lose Donato, who was able to jump around different spots in the lineup last year, so he's really filled that gap well. I'd love to see him score a little bit more here and there, but I think that'll come. And you hear the coaching staff kind of repeat that same thing, like, hey, the scoring will come as long as you're doing the right things, playing defensively properly, uh, you know, back checking, all of the things that you want your forwards to do, supporting the breakout properly, and line changes. Always important across the board. We saw that bite the Kraken a few times on the road trip, more specifically towards the end of it, but, probably because they're not feeling great. But yeah, you got to be sharp in all of these areas. But Ty Cartier, I love that pick. I'll give you mine real quick. MVP
Mhm.
for me, I agree with you. Joey Decord. It's just we would not be where the Kraken would not be where they're at without Joey Decord and how he's played this season. Biggest disappointment for me, and this is tough because I don't like picking on players, but I would just kind of put on the table the name Jordan Eberle. He has been good.
Mhm.
I would like to see a little bit more offensive production from him, and I love Jordan Eberle, so don't get me wrong there, but just maybe a little bit more in the tally sheet from him. That would be my only disappointment so far. Biggest surprise for me, William Borgen. He's been
Mhm.
really solid. I feel like his game has evolved a lot in addition to being kind of that tough guy and enforcer at times. I don't know if you want to chit chat about William Borgen, the Borgatron on the back blue line. What are your thoughts on William Borgen?
He that's a great pick. He is this franchise and Ron Francis's visions like poster child. Took him in the expansion draft where probably nobody expected that to be the pick from Buffalo. And sat most of that first year and just learned,
Hmm.
got to practice with an NHL team. That is a big thing in the news right now with Magna playing considerable minutes for Chicago now that he got moved and claimed. That he was talking
Right.
about what his experience here was like. And it was very reminiscent to like the Hayden Fleury situation and how Borgen was. But the more time you spend with the team and in the system, the more familiar you are with it. And so
Mhm.
last year was kind of his introduction to like, hey, here I am as a real hockey player, not just a depth or a bench guy. And he has completely grown in that. And he is a solid second pairing defender right now. Like he is exactly what you want to see when you're building a franchise. Like I said, Francis had a vision of like, hey, I'm gonna not necessarily grab the Vladimir Tarasenko's of these teams. We're not gonna do it the Vegas way of just grab the biggest, best names. We're trying to build a franchise, not just put skaters on the ice. Um, and Borgen is exactly what you want out of that. Like he's now grown in our system into a well-established blue liner. If we didn't have Dunn and Larson on that top pairing, you could almost make an argument that Borgen could almost play some top minutes on this team. He might not be a top pairing defender league wide, but in our system, I think
Right.
he could fill in or play that top pairing and do just fine.
Yeah, and typically, with the defenders, it's going to take a little longer for them to kind of
Mm-hmm.
mature, grow into their role. The peak of a defender's career is a little bit more delayed than a forward. You see it all the time. Defenders, late bloomers, I like to call them, but William Borgen really coming into his own here in the third season for the Kraken, and it's really great to see. I love his style of game too. You kind of get that attitude, belligerent Borgie that we joke about over on X, but he's tough. He's You're gonna take the good with the bad. You're gonna see some of those. What are you doing? Why'd you turn the puck over? It's gonna happen a little bit because I don't think handling the puck and breaking out with the puck comes as naturally to him like a Vince Dunn type. But he's really improved. Maybe that's the one category I should have put on the notes here is most improved this season. Borgen could easily be in that category as well. But yeah, some great bright future type comments here with Rick Judd. Thanks for being here again, Rick. Let's look ahead to the homestand just a little bit as we keep rolling. We've got a 4-game homestand. We talked a little bit about it coming into the episode today, and I'm getting blown out by the sunlight right now, which is a good thing, but it's really hard to see my screen. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep going. This is how we do it. But yeah, let's talk about the homestand kicking off against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Austin Matthews into town. How do you beat the Toronto Maple Leafs and start this homestand on a positive note?
Oh man. It's got to be with depth.
Yep.
Very similar. I see Toronto very similar to like a Colorado Avalanche. Um, like one for one, their top line versus pretty much any other top line. You're not going to beat them. And that's really the game plan in that first playoff series last year with Colorado. Our lines are not going to match up one for one with theirs, but if we could mix match them and get them on
Mhm.
off their pace, you can take them. And I think that's exactly how you do your game planning for Toronto. Like you beat them the times that Matthews, Marner, and Tavares aren't on the ice, which is only going to be a couple lines at a time. But if you can mix the lines up to where our firsts and seconds, or really our most productive line, that third line with Bjorkstrand, Gourde, and Tolvanen, if you can get them on the ice with their third or fourth line, I think we
Mhm.
can take it. But you just have to rein in the league's top scoring forward in Austin Matthews right now. So that's hard to do, and not very many people can do that. But they also can come at you from the wings with Marner, and Tavares is kind of their senior officer up there, but he's still a first overall pick caliber forward. So it I
Yeah.
that is probably the biggest matchup to me in this homestand, because Toronto is they're an original six, like they're a huge team. But then we come right after them to play Chicago. So even if it is a tough game, if we can come out with some positives on Sunday against Toronto, I feel like all of that momentum against a Blackhawks team that is missing Connor Bedard right now spells a lot of fortune in your favor.
And the strength of schedule really goes into the Kraken's favor in the back half of the schedule. So you kind of get through this, really tough stretch out on the road. You come home, you kick things off against Toronto, but it's going to get a little bit easier for Seattle down the stretch. But it has to be a collective effort. You're not going to outscore the Maple Leafs. Their power play pretty good too, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's got to be a collective effort. I love how you kind of, flash back to last year's playoffs against Colorado. Similar approach. You have to minimize those top lines, the looks that they're going to get, and just kind of maintain your defensive posture throughout. Try to score when you can, and try to frustrate them a little bit. That's another approach you can take, and I feel like the Kraken are capable of that. Let's see what they can do on home ice. Really big 4-game homestand kicks off Sunday. Rick, you're going to be at the game providing coverage if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
On Sunday.
So I'll be up in the media booth this Sunday against the Maple Leafs, and then the game against Columbus. So I'll bookend the homestand. But coverage with Allison Ballard on her outlet, which is called Corsi. So kind of like the stat Corsi, but Corsea. So you'll see her on social media, whether it's Instagram or X, Twitter, whatever. But writing for her and covering for her. So you'll see that. You'll see me at the game. So for those of you that go to the Living Wall during that first intermission, I'll be there. But yeah, it's gonna be exciting. I think a long road trip, I think, always makes people excited to be back in the deep. So it's gonna be nice to see all of us hockey fans, all of us friends back in the arena. And I think for the team itself, I think it's gonna be nice to be in their own barn again.
Yeah, a little home cooking never hurts. So
yeah,
I'll leave links down in description here if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening, also in the show notes for Rick. Follow him over on X. Also pointed out Allison does a great job covering the Kraken for her outlet. So thanks again for being here, Rick. Before we wrap things up, though, I did do that Winter Classic episode where we got to hear from everybody, and I know you wanted to participate in that. Things timing-wise got a little bit thrown off. But let's talk just real quick about your experience. You got to take it in as a fan, if I'm not mistaken, for the Winter Classic there at T-Mobile Park. Maybe just kind of talk us through your day, how it went, and some of the memories that really stood out to you as you got to take that in.
It was really special. It's one of those like lifelong memories. I took my dad, and it was really awesome. We got down to downtown very early. The game was at noon. I think we were down there by like 7:45 or 8. So we went out for breakfast, and there was a bunch of hockey people we found like the only restaurant that was open that early for breakfast down there. So it was very crowded, but it was really fun. The energy was already at that time popping, and the fan village wasn't going to open for like another 2 hours. So got down there. It was really fun. We didn't get into the fan village just because by the time we were there, gates were opening at T-Mobile, and we could wait in line here and then have to wait in line again to see the Stanley Cup, or we go into the stadium. But we got in. We sat out in like right field, home run area. So it was a very as we're used to the deep and Climate Pledge, where there's not really a bad seat in the house. Even the seats behind the press wing, like you can still see the ice. Like it's still a good view. It's just a little different. Outdoor games are not that way. So it's you're there for the experience, and it was a once in a lifetime. Hopefully not once in a lifetime. Hopefully we get to do it again soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
But it was definitely a little unique. Like I picked tickets so that I could see the ice, but then I could also see the big screen, because the way that it went, pretty much everybody in our section, we could see our half of the ice, and then as soon as they got to mid ice, everyone just turned and looked at the big screen because you couldn't see the far end of the ice very well.
Okay.
But man, the vibe of the arena was excellent. Seeing, I think it was nearly a full house. T-Mobile holds 47 and change, and I think we are like 100 seats less than a full capacity, which is excellent. Add into the fact that we shut out Vegas, really made it excellent. And then to hear 47,000 people chant for Joey DeCord was awesome. And I joke with my wife that the entrance with Sir Mix-a-Lot introducing the team, them coming out to fire and fireworks, and then the Pike Place guys throwing the fish with the jerseys. I told my wife, I was like, that is my Roman Empire. I will remember that and think about that for the rest of my life. Like that was the epitome of like Seattle experience. Like it was really wonderful. Getting to hear Hart during one of the intermissions was really great. During the game, our row got to play one of the little TV timeout games. So we had to pass this
Oh,
inflatable. They called it an inflatable, but it was a pillow. Bread back and forth down the rows for some Jersey Mike's gift cards, and our row won. So it was really cool. It was like
nice.
awesome. So I had free Jersey Mike's the other day with the gift card, but it was just a really cool experience. It was really neat. It was different
Wait,
for.
hold on. I'm curious though. When you go Jersey Mike's, do you go Mike's way?
Oh, of course.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. That's important stuff, Rick.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
I remember the first time I went. So sidebar a little bit, but a couple years ago we got a Jersey Mike's out where we live, and I'd never been before. So I went. I was like, sandwiches, great. And I went there and ordering. The guy's like, "Do you want it Mike's way?" I was like, "I don't know what that is." And he just points behind and goes, "That." I was like, "That doesn't answer my question." But yeah, all the extra fixings, absolutely.
Well, my name is Mike, so
Yeah,
I'm always like, of course I want it my way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Right.
But yeah, being outside to watch hockey was awesome. It was cold. Like it was, I mean, cold. It was 40 degrees, but colder than it is inside. Um,
Right.
but it was just awesome. And then to add it that we played that well on a national scene was really cool. It was also really neat that the NHL on TNT guys were there. So like Wayne
Hmm.
Gretzky is walking around the stadium, and everywhere he walked, you could tell because people were cheering, people were waving. Like he was I mean, he's the great one. So he's a star no matter
Yeah.
where he goes. And I heard, didn't see it, but I heard that when Hart was playing during the intermission, like he was over in the crowd watching Hart play.
Oh,
So it's
that's
like
cool.
that's neat. And they opened with like pyrotechnics and stuff. So it was really, really cool. One of those experiences where I didn't think I was going to go until like a couple weeks
Yeah.
before. So I'm really glad that I did go.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, a kind of a culminating type
Hmm.
experience, being a lifelong hockey fan, growing up in the area, going to Mariners games at T-Mobile Park, and then it's just that whole, flip of, genre to hockey, and it's really incredible seeing the imagery that came out of it, everything, the stories. Just, I felt really honored to be able to share other people's stories, and I kind of wanted to give you that chance because we had talked behind the scenes, and it was just really really cool. I really hope that they do it again. I feel like it's a really incredible venue to do so, and it went
Hmm.
well. They've got the roof. Maybe the only negative was, I guess, the ratings weren't as good as some of the other ones, but maybe you market it a little bit differently. Maybe you play, I don't know, some sort of mix up the matchups a little bit or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that they can figure that part out,
Yeah.
or just deal with the fact that maybe West Coast ratings are just going to be a little bit lower.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've got thoughts on the viewership because our market for Seattle is all Fubo based. Like Root
Yeah,
heavily pushes Fubo for how to watch the Kraken. Um, the TNT network is not on Fubo at all. And when you're
right.
putting a major event nationally out and want to tout it as until the last couple years the highest rated and highest viewed game of the season, you want to put it on the market that you're playing in is going to be able to see, and they
Yeah,
they didn't. So it could have been an NBC game, it could have been anything else, and they would have done a lot better. Like when you look the article they posted about that, the numbers drastically dropped when they stopped airing it on NBC and moved to TNT
correct.
because it's not a cable network. Like it's, and then it was just very interesting when they posted all that, and I got really defensive about it. It's like, no, it's not that it was in Seattle. There are so many other things that went into that. It was a wonderful game. It was
Right.
awesome. It was just some national pundits who don't like West Coast.
Then the narrative kind of runs, and
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. But yeah, really good point. A lot of the Winter Classics in the past were on NBC, so if you're going to compare things, you got to compare them in a fair way. But either way, it was an incredible event, and the venue was amazing, and it all went just, you know, off the charts as far as Seattle fans were concerned, and I would bet the Vegas fans that were there had a great time as well,
Yeah.
despite losing to the Kraken.
It was in Vegas. Being there meant that Keegan Colasar, Shea Theodore got to be there, so that's some old history with the Thunderbirds. So there was some. I
Mhm.
know there are quite a few still diehard Thunderbirds fans, even with the Kraken here. So getting to see those guys and celebrate that they brought a WHL championship to the city of Seattle, Kent, um, before, really cool. And Shea still coming to the event, even though he's on the IR and still doing fan
Yeah,
interaction stuff. Really awesome. Keegan Colasar had some press conferences that he got to talk about how special it was to come back to Seattle. So as much as we don't like as a fan base, Kraken fan base don't like Vegas, you still got to
right.
take the bigger picture and be like, well, there's some guys that are really special to like hockey history in Seattle that just happen to play for that team. So getting to see that
Definitely.
interaction was really cool.
That's awesome. Thanks, Rick, for sharing. And thank you for being here today. Like I said, the first official Morning Cup of Kraken here on Sasquatch NHL, Kraken coverage, and all sorts of great things we do. Trivia. I'm trying to do a few new segments, and
Mm-hmm.
Rick, I'm going to have you back, of course, throughout all the changes here into the new year of 2024. Can't wait to see where the Kraken end up. But thanks again today. Any last words before we wrap up?
Um, I would say that I had somebody, or I saw something on X the other day about like what's a piece of advice for that you just want to share. Um, and what I posted was to stay positive and always give people the benefit of the doubt. So um, remain positive, stay humble, whether that's watching hockey or just in life. But try to be a positive influence on those around you.
I love that. Build up the community, and it can be Kraken focused, but it doesn't have to be Kraken
Yeah.
focused as well. So, yeah, thanks for that, Rick. I appreciate it. And thanks again for being here today. That's going to do it for this morning's Morning Cup of Kraken episode. Great to have Rick by and talk Kraken. Let's see what they do against the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight. And we'll catch you guys again on another episode here real soon. Sasquatch NHL. Have a great day.
See ya.